Is Whis a good character? Or better yet, a good mentor character? Last week I spoke at length about Beerus and what he offers the show. Was he good? Was he bad? If you haven't seen it, check out that video. But it got me thinking about the other new character that was introduced. Does he have the same issues that plagued Beerus, or was he a great inclusion in his own right? So, like many of my other videos, I took to Twitter asking if you guys thought he was a good or a bad inclusion to the series. With almost 4,000 votes cast, Whis was in high favor among the fan base, with almost 80% claiming to enjoy his inclusion. However, in order for me to figure out how I felt about Whis and his role as a mentor character, I first needed to understand what makes a good mentor character in Dragon Ball. There have been quite a few mentor-student relationships in this series, and I want to see how the Angel of the 7th Universe measures up. This is my analysis on Dragon Ball's mentor characters and the strongest being in Universe 7.
Alright, what the hell are you?
I'm simply the life form that's known as Whis.
The mentor character was honestly not one I consider to be of major importance in the series, at least not at first glance. However, in writing this video, I've learned more about writing and specifically Dragon Ball than any other video I've ever made in the past. And that's because most of the major plot points throughout Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z have been developed and processed through a mentor-pupil relationship. Characters like Master Roshi, Kami, and King Kai have played a major role for long periods of time, and even Goku has assumed the mentor role when the occasion arose both in Dragon Ball Z and Super. But today the question is, does Whis contribute to the series in the mentor role as well as those that came before him? Well, what's interesting is the mentor character is one of the most vital roles in most of the character arcs we've enjoyed within the series. Sort of the catalyst for the character arc, if you will. I've spoken at length before about the writing technique, the lie the character believes, as written in K.M. Weiland's book, Creating Character Arcs. This is when a character believes something untrue either about themselves, the world, or both. A mentor character admonishes the protagonist with some form of insight that he or she does not yet understand about themselves or the world they live in. In other words, providing the student or pupil with the teachings or advice they need to better themselves, to find the truth, to correct that lie that they believe. The most important part of a mentor character is how they relate or don't relate to the lie the protagonist believes. For instance, at the very beginning of Dragon Ball Z, Gohan and Piccolo began one of the more interesting and complicated mentor-student relationships. From the moment we meet Gohan, we learn that he is a timid, fearful child that is capable of much more than he or anyone else can comprehend. However, the lie that he believes at this point of the story is that he needs people to take care of him, that he can't help anyone in a combative effort, and that he is weak, both of physical body and of character. However, once Piccolo gets a glimpse of this young half-Saiyan's power, both he and Gohan begin a year-long stint of training together, wherein Piccolo attempts to advise and tutor Gohan to trust more in himself. During a mentor's teaching, a common trope is for the mentor to reveal information or place the pupil into a circumstance that they are not ready for. In the case of Gohan, that was his encounter with the invading Saiyans. Despite having come much farther than he ever thought he would, Gohan still is terrified of these alien invaders and as a result runs the moment he's depended on. Furthermore, due to his helplessness, due to this lie that he believes, his mentor Piccolo sacrifices himself to save Gohan. This act inspires the young Saiyan to act more courageously and realize what he, Piccolo, had been teaching him all arc long. And that's not to say that there can't be a mentor-pupil dynamic that can't result in a mentor learning something too. Instances like this make for fascinating and believable characters. And once again, Piccolo and Gohan demonstrate that perfectly. While Piccolo helped Gohan believe in himself, Gohan began to show Piccolo that it's okay to believe in others. Both of these characters in this section of the story undergo a positive change thanks in large part to the guidance of each other, the result of the mentor-student relationship. And that's sort of the idea behind it, at least in one way. You see, mentor characters don't always succeed in helping their pupil. In some cases, the mentor fails to understand the student or puts him or her into a position they are not yet ready for, resulting in them embracing the lie instead of the truth. That was Goasu's mistake when dealing with Zamasu, a mistake that he later admits to in the arc. Bouncing off that slightly depressing note, Goku has had more mentors in Dragon Ball than any of the others. So, how does he fit into this whole mentor-student dynamic? Well, as I said before, the mentor is supposed to act as something of a catalyst for the pupil character's given archetype. And so, as I explained in my very first video of this series, Goku is a terrific example of what K.M. Weiland calls a flat character arc. In short, a flat character arc is distinctly different from a positive or negative character arc as seen in the likes of Gohan's positive arc and Zamasu's negative one, wherein the mentor and the world changes the character for the better or for the worse. However, in the case of the flat character arc, the protagonist or individual isn't burdened by a lie that they hold to be true and as a result changes the world around around them for the better instead of the world changing them. Transforming a light-burdened world is sort of their role. Goku's minor personality changes and overall maturity in the series don't detract from his position as a flat character, although I can sort of see the confusion. When I affirm the position that Goku is an example of a flat character arc, it implies that he doesn't develop in the narrative as a result of his archetype. But some people have argued that there are plenty of examples demonstrating Goku's emotional maturity and physical maturity in the series, and this is absolutely true. However, when I talk about his flat character arc, I am referring to Goku's story. Those acts and changes are not what Goku's story is about. Unlike Piccolo and Vegeta that very clearly follow a positive change throughout, Goku interacts with the world and changes it for the better, reaffirming his flat character archetype. A flat character arc doesn't imply that he himself doesn't change as a person at all, but that the story that he is on isn't concerned with any changes, be they minor or major, that he undergoes. Whereas in the case of Vegeta, any positive change was the entire point of his story. And so, while keeping in mind that Goku changes the world around him for the better, presenting a lie-burdened world with truth, and a mentor character is supposed to act as a catalyst for this character arc, it's only natural that this happens when he encounters a mentor character. Whether it be with Roshi or King Kai, Goku demonstrates time and again that the expectations of whomever was around him, including his current mentors, would be easily surpassed.
Go ahead and try to jump as high as you can. Oh.
A major drawback to these dynamics, however, with Goku and his mentors is that on their own, there isn't any conflict like there would naturally be with dynamics like Gohan and Zamasu. For this reason, while he was training with Roshi, Krillin provided that positive character arc and the conflict for the story early on. Goku's training under Kami was largely not shown at all, and with King Kai, Gohan's training with Piccolo coupled with the time limit of the Saiyan invasion provided it there. And so, while it's fun to watch Goku train under a mentor, there has always been careful planning in place during his time under tutelage. And that's because under this tutelage, Goku doesn't change from the mentor relationship, or at least not in the way that a character typically does. Meaningful change in these relationships comes from emotional growth, a rejection of their lie and an adoption of their mentor's truth, resulting in a much more satisfying and happy life for the student character. And so, because King Kai didn't offer any emotional growth for Goku, there needed to be something else to provide that emotional through-line for the arc, which is why we had Piccolo's death scene at the hands of Nappa and nothing nearly as emotional for Goku. And the reason I'm going through all of this is because it's sort of important to understand, because it will inform our understanding of Goku and Vegeta's time spent under Whis, as well as his involvement in the series of Dragon Ball Super.
Oh, I love spring.
Now, before I say anything, I want to make clear that I, much like the other 80-some% of you, really genuinely like Whis as a personality. But oftentimes, it's easy to forget that these characters are just that, individuals created to serve a purpose within a fictional story. Making arguments for them based off of character and who they might be or what they might do instead of utility and story leads us down a very strange path of hypotheticals and hyperbole, so yes, I do like Whis as a personality. I think both voice actors from Japan and the US offer a wonderful humanity and sass to him that elevates his likability exponentially across the board, which is great. He adds an interesting dynamic to Beerus that elevates his character too, and he adds a massive sense of scale when it comes to the ability for the main cast and what's to come for them. But given what we now understand is the desired utility and optimal effect a mentor character should have within a series for a positive, negative, and flat arc character, let's take a look at how Whis' inclusion contributes to those. The beginning of Whis' training sees two different beginnings during Resurrection F and within Dragon Ball Super's TV series, and while there are differences between both, most notably in Dragon Ball Super where Vegeta seeks out training first as he is still obsessed with catching up to Goku, both result in the same advice being lobbed towards their respective students. Whis informs Goku that his overconfidence is his shortcoming and Vegeta's is his tense, unrelaxed composure. This is presented such that if they can overcome this mental block, they will attain what later becomes known as Ultra Instinct. While both of these pieces of advice are interesting and worth delving into more, once the Resurrection F portion of the story completes, Goku's problem isn't touched on ever again, and Vegeta's is only briefly alluded to via body language in less than a few scenes throughout, and at the very end where he decides to stop chasing Goku suddenly. Neither Goku nor Vegeta had any emotional growth in these lessons from Whis, in the case of Vegeta suddenly shifting from obsessing over his position compared with Goku to not caring at all, blazing his own trail, is not development. When something happens without prior reasoning or emotional growth, that's called character convenience, not character growth. Whis outlines two distinct and easily understood shortcomings within both of these fighters, and the closest thing we get to development, shockingly, is through Goku, who gets taken out due to this very shortcoming, but afterwards, this lesson isn't necessarily learned, it just happens and everyone sort of moves on. Goku's overconfidence is then on display throughout the rest of Super thereafter, despite being shown to train alongside Vegeta and Whis for the remainder of the series. Realistically, this advice should conflict with Goku's emotional state, and ultimately culminate in him accepting this shortcoming and adopting a better way of life. But then that would be contradicting Goku's character type. Goku, if you remember, already has the truth. He's a flat character arc, and therefore growing emotionally doesn't come easily to him. So nothing happens. Dragon Ball Z's workaround for this was to have Goku impress his mentors or simply not show his training at all. And during these times, others would either be by his side in these efforts to provide the necessary struggle or occupying an adjacent part of the story like Piccolo and Gohan did. Within this instance in Dragon Ball Super, they tried to give Goku an emotional fault alongside Vegeta. In Goku's case, it's flat out forgotten about, and in the case of Vegeta, it just suddenly happens without any gradual introspection or struggle on Vegeta's behalf, specifically concerning this inability to relax. Now, it could be argued that Whis was in a no-win scenario with this particular plotline. It sort of existed to create the twist ending for the Resurrection F arc and nothing more, and I think that's a fair way to look at it, but that still doesn't mean that Whis did a good job. The warriors didn't struggle emotionally to learn anything, and as a result, we never got any cathartic moments due to these lessons Whis was espousing. Which brings me to my final critique of his character: the exposition. In John Truby's book, The Anatomy of Story, he writes, "You never want to create characters that sound like a mouthpiece for your ideas. Good writers express their moral vision slow and subtly, primarily through story structure and the way the hero deals with a particular situation. And if all a character is there for is to monologue exposition in obvious ways or to facilitate magical Deus Ex Machina type plot device endings, at least in my opinion, it leaves a lot to be desired." Which is a crying shame of the highest order because, as I said before, I adore Whis and the style of personality that he's portrayed as having. He's charming, interesting, and boasts a wonderful design, but much like many of the other changes and storylines Dragon Ball Super has delivered, it's been far from super and closer to mediocre and short-sighted. And that's what I learned in this video. Somewhat fittingly, this video about mentor characters has taught me more about story dynamics and Dragon Ball than perhaps any of the others I've made, and I've made quite a few. I love Whis as much as the next guy, and Ian Sinclair is my spirit animal. In reality, I think the issues I have with Whis can be boiled down to a side effect of a much more broader issue that lies within Dragon Ball Super itself. And perhaps it's high time I begin to dig deeper and talk more about that. But until then, thank you so much for watching.